Hey everyone, welcome to episode 41 of Theme Park Workshop. Today we're going to be recapping all things Halloween Horror Nights 32. The season just ended a couple days ago and we're all in withdrawals and denial. But like I said, my name's Bella and today we have
Adam Johnson lost in the fog.
he's gone. And we also have
Yeti Campground Kells, also known as Kelly or Killer Kells.
period. And yeah, so it's pretty straightforward, just like how I said in the intro. We're going to be talking about all things Halloween Horror Nights. Specifically, we're going to be talking about our house and Scare Zone rankings, reviews, run totals, if we kept track of that, and all things houses and Scare Zones. So, to start, we should do Scare Zones, right? Start with the zones.
Yeah.
Perfect.
It is one of the strangest tales ever told. I think it will thrill you. It may shock you. It might even horrify you.
Welcome to the Dark Fantastic!
I'm not a monster, Jake.
I'll show you who I am and what I am! Yeah, you love this one. It's a scream, baby.
It's showtime.
I am your mother.
I hate to float.
I don't feel like she's not a mistake at all. Like she's better for being different.
Gender fluid.
No matter what, you keep finding something to fight for.
Hey, Michael!
What's your favorite scary movie?
You want stars? I'll give you stars.
So if any of you feel that you do not care to subject your nerves to such a strain, now is your chance to, well, we've warned you.
Well, I'll go first for Scare Zones. Number 5. This should be no surprise to anyone based on how I feel. Number 5 is Dark Zodiac. Nothing against anyone in that zone. I thought everyone looked very cool, very slay, very scary. But, the chainsaws lived there. I was not lucky enough to see them with the big swords, which were awesome, might I say. So I actually never walked through this zone. I just walked on the sidewalk, which I don't really count as walking through a zone. Y'all know how I feel about chainsaws, so this shouldn't be a shock to anyone. But I did love the chainsaw costumes. Remind me of Kim Kardashian's Met Gala look from a couple years ago when she wore like the black mask over her face and the all black. Kind of remind me of that, but they were bedazzled. I loved it. I did. And then next, number 4, we have Shipyard 32. I did love the zone. I loved seeing like the hedge apple from Wicked Growth and last year in the front Scare Zone. Patricia, no other comments necessary. Loved finding out about, I think Adam, you sent it to us, that she was in Eddie's Scare Zone in HHN 30, which period. Had no idea. I never spent time in that. I didn't spend much time in there anyway because of the chainsaws. So I probably didn't see her. But I loved the zone. I thought it was very fun seeing like Nosferatu and like that one fairy and the old guy with the wrench. Loved the old guy with the wrench. He followed me the last night. It was really funny. But the one downside of the Scare Zone is that the bottleneck is so bad. Like the other night, like it was shoulder to shoulder. We couldn't move, which was crazy because like the rest of the park was dead. So wasn't it the Killer Clown Scare Zone where they had it shifted down a little bit more? Like, why can't they do that again? Is there like a reason?
That's a good point. I think this year they wouldn't do that because the Fast and Furious.
Yeah, well, yeah,
courtyard
Fast and
was
Furious
very
is now a
Chucky.
house. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, even like I'm sure they could like do the Scare Zone all the way back to Louis and Wasserman and stuff, except
Yeah.
they wanted to tie the Scare Zone, or not the Scare Zone, the house into the food, and then you could have the Megans in that open area.
Yeah, like it makes sense. It's just like it always puts a damper on that Scare Zone. I feel like whenever, like, I mean, this was my 3rd year going. I feel like those Scare Zones always kind of that one always ranks kind of lower just because of like it's a hassle getting through there, and I just don't spend as much time in there. But I loved all the set pieces. I loved the big crane. Loved Patricia. Loved Hedge Apple. Period. Next, at number 3, we have Jungle of Doom. I did like Jungle of Doom. I always had a lot of fun in there. I loved the praying mantis, the stilt performer. Everything was so pretty and bright and fluorescent, and I loved how it looked at night, but like seeing all the colors and everything during the day and like the bats, like it was always so much fun. But that is also another very small scare zone. But that one scare actor who had like the rattler thing, oh my god, they got me good every single time, no matter what cast, every single day.
I just want to add in while we're talking about that I did see that scare actor playing with a child with the rattle one night, and the kid was like scared in a stroller, but then like they were playing with the kid and the kid was like giggling and having the best time, and that was probably the cutest thing I've ever seen, like ever.
That's so cute.
Wholesome.
I love that.
Which is funny because the rattle scared the hell out of me every single time I walked through there. So I was like, oh, how
the
healing and
duality.
nice. Yeah.
The duality.
The duality of scare acting.
Literally. No, that zone was a lot of fun. I loved the little Oddfellow show at the front too. And I like how they changed it as like the event went on, like more lines were added. I never really spent a lot of time in there just because it is so small, and they'll kind of tell you to keep going. Which makes sense. It's a scare zone. And it's very small. But it was always a bop. But sometimes the fog would get too thick and you couldn't see anything. And that made it more fun. Especially after a couple blinky drinkies. It was fun. Why are you laughing at me calling it a blinky drinky?
No, it was the combination of everything where it's like it was fun, especially when it was a blinky drinky. But I laugh, Bella. I'm laughing with you. I'm supporting you. You're making me laugh because of your
because of my blinky drinky. Good. But yeah, then number 2, I have Dr. Oddfellow's Collection of Horrors. I loved the scare zone. I loved seeing Dr. Oddfellow up on his little caravan every time I come in. If I wasn't staying screaming, you know, the vibes. And I loved that he was just talking. He was just saying stuff, and I ate every second up. I loved it. And I loved that you got to interact with him. Kelly was there when we saw him for the first time, and he roasted the both of us so hard for our star signs. He said dreamer, can't decide, stuff, roasted me hard for my chart.
I mean, we are Pisces. Like, is he wrong?
Yeah, Pisces sun, Capricorn moon, Cancer rising. Yeah, he roasted us for our star signs. And then I went back one night and he called me his little dreamer, and I cried. I cried. But it was just like so fun, and I love that you got a taste of every scare zone. I love the costumes, I love the colors, I loved how far down it went. Because it kind of bled into Dark Zodiac. I loved that. I loved the stilts. I loved the vibes. I loved his little welcoming in pre-show thing. Like, all around good vibes. Fantastic vibes. I can't wait to see him at the event again because I love him so much. Dr. Oddfellow is one of the smartest things Horror Nights and Universal Creative have done. He is amazing. Anyway, more to come on him later. But
did you say you're a Capricorn moon?
I am a Capricorn moon.
I'm also a Pisces sun, Capricorn moon. But I'm a Libra rising.
Are you gals actually twins?
I think we are. I think we're twins.
Twinsies.
We're twins. I was gonna sing a song about twins, but nothing came to mind.
I'm just like you. You're just like me.
There's something anyone can
see.
Anyway.
I'm just Ken.
Anywhere else I'd be in. Okay, let's not get
beautiful.
copyrighted. But my number 1 zone, to no surprise, is Vamp 69. Absolutely not a shocker here. I knew I was gonna love the zone. I always love the zones in New York. It was just the playlist. The playlist was so good. They got the Beatles. They had Sweet Caroline. I loved the conga line during that song. It was just the vibes. I spent the most time in that zone. I don't usually spend time in zones that much at Horror Nights unless like I have friends over there. But
would
like,
you say the vibes were so good, so good, so good?
So good. They were so good, so good, so good. You're so right. I've been inclined. Dun dun dun. Yeah. So good. I don't even know that that's the right word, but it's fine. But
it is, yes.
It is. Okay, good. I'm baby, okay? But it was just a great time. I loved all the costumes. I loved how many actors were in that zone. Chomper was my favorite. Loved Chomper.
Me too. I love Chomper.
And then there was that guy in the purple tank top with the long hair. Loved him.
Those are my two favorites.
Oh my god, we are twins.
We are twins. If anyone doesn't know who Chomper is, that's Leo Vibes t-shirt. Love him. And then the purple victim in the tank top, I got a great selfie with him on one of my last days there. But he was always like, you gotta help me, man. And I was like, I didn't find any of that holy water you asked me for like 4 weeks ago. And he was like, I don't know, man. I found this gilly water. It hasn't really done anything though.
No, and like I'd see so many funny videos on TikTok of like one scare actor asking someone for a Band-Aid because they were bit by a vamp. Like, it was just the best time. And they were also very aggressive in that zone. Like, they were not afraid to get right up to you. And I really enjoyed that. It made it a lot of fun.
The girl with the hammer.
Yes, the girl with the hammer.
She got right in I was like, I don't know how she doesn't hit people. That's very impressive.
That's how I feel about the guy with the wrench in Shipyard. He'd be right there. Or like the thing from in the zone in that area last year. Conjure the Dark. That guy with the horns and the thing, he'd be banging that on the truck. He'd get right in your face. I'm like, okay, all right, I see.
That guy in Last of Us as well with the big club.
Yeah. My only thing that I wish the zone did better. I wish there was a show moment like the other two previous Vamp zones, because I wanted to experience the Vamp 85. I wanted to experience that show moment so bad because it looked like so much fun. So I wish that they did that, but like other than that, there were nights where like I was there by myself and I was like waiting on people and I was just sitting on a bench in the scare zone just watching. Like, I loved it. But yeah, that honestly didn't really change much from my preseason. Actually, it did change a lot from my preseason. I had Dark Zodiac at 3 and I had Shipyard 32 at 5. So those just switched. No, they didn't. Shipyard is 4, but you get the idea. But yeah, I thought the zones were really fun this year. I know a lot of people were complaining about them, which is like annoying.
That's crazy talk.
It's like, okay.
Oh yeah, I guess you're right. People were complaining on Facebook.
Yeah, on Facebook. Oh my god, the Facebook. Like, all right, like, don't go. But I loved it. I always love the zones. So I'm excited to see what they do next year, but I'm definitely going to miss Vamp 69 so much. What did you guys feel about Scarezones this year?
Ooh, do you want to hear our rankings? Adam, do you want me to go first or do you want to go?
You go ahead.
Well, I'll get into it then. I loved the Scarezones this year. So my favorite year for Scarezones is going to be hard to beat because I had very close friends that I know even outside of haunt season that were in the zones, 2 of them. I got to spend more time there because I was a local. So in college, I went to HHN 28 in 2018. That was personally my favorite year for zones. I don't know if anything will ever top it. It was the best. And they were all very personal zones to me, like, which is part of why I loved them so much. Like the properties were very personal to me. Vamp 85 was fantastic. I've gone to all the Vamp zones. I don't know what my favorite is. It would be very close between that one and 69 for me, as far as Vamp zones. I just loved 28. However, 32 has been my second favorite year for zones personally. Like, this year was so solid. Ranking them is actually really hard for me because I loved them all so much. I wanted to put all of them at number 1, except for maybe my last one, and I'll mention why, because I did still love it, but it wasn't I knew it was going to be last, and there's a reason for that. And unfortunately, as it goes, sometimes location has something to do with that. My number 5 though is Dr. Oddfellow's Collection of Horror. And I know, Bella, it was so much higher on yours.
What?
It's just so empty compared to the other zones. Like the stage show is fantastic. I loved seeing Oddfellow. I loved hearing him talk about stuff. I loved hearing him roasting people. I only watched it a couple times when I could be closer to the front, but you know, and sometimes I just wasn't there very much if I kind of, you know, did stay and scream and I was towards the back. But I don't know, I just wish there was more going on, and I feel like that's what happens a lot of time in those front zones, with some exceptions, like something like Anarcade, where they do something completely different. But when it's like the collection zones like that, where they kind of have, you know, it's got repeats of things from other zones or houses, it's kind of just like this is what you're going to see at the event sort of thing. And Oddfellow is fantastic. I think he is one of the best icons, if not the best icon. He's definitely, it's hard to pick a favorite, but he's certainly in my top 3. I mean, he is fantastic. Definitely the best icon in recent years and things like that. But just the zone itself struggled for me based on the type of zone it is, where it's like a, you know, best of showcase sort of zone. And I just didn't get a lot of scares or interactions in that zone other than the stage show. So it just, and Oddfellow is in other zones, so I might have interacted with him more in another zone. Or several other zones. He's actually in all of them, if you guys didn't know that. But I know that you two know this, but for the listeners. We've talked about that a little bit in other episodes. My number 4, this is where it gets hard for me, especially my top 3, but this one as well, because I did have some great interactions here, was Shipyard. I really did enjoy it. Again, this is kind of a bottleneck zone. It kind of suffers from the same feeling empty sometimes. I mean, not as much. I feel like there were more scare actors in there, but just kind of the way they had to separate to make sure people are able to walk through there, since that zone doesn't have any kind of like sidewalk you can go around it. You have to go right through. It just would get super crowded. So I didn't get a lot of time to interact with scare actors in there, but my interactions were really memorable. I loved anytime I saw Tooth Fairy, I cheered for her, and she was always very excited. Adam and I had a really nice interaction with her where she did like a little shy like dance for us. Even I saw her during a cast change on my last night, and I was like, Tooth Fairy, you're amazing and beautiful, and I love you. And she got all excited as she was walking off. So like that was really cool. And just both casts have different types of monsters too. I mean, there's you know, like Tooth is only in one of the casts, and then there's 2 different like Nosferatu type characters. There's a questionable werewolf that is supposed to be Oddfellow, which I think maybe was not necessarily portrayed to, like, I think some departments had some miscommunication there.
That werewolf, terrifying, because
Scary.
So tiny,
yes,
and so quick, and they would go for your knees. It was so, they would always be coming for my knees, like the
scare actor was iconic.
No,
like, that
iconic,
was great.
like hands down iconic. I like never expected them. Anytime I went in there, I would forget, and all of a sudden they'd be right there. But oh my gosh, they were so intense.
Yes,
no,
so they were great. There was just, and there were like there were just all kinds of different characters in there, and they were so much fun. I had a good time. There was actually one time where I was cheering for Tooth Fairy, and then there's a guy, and I apologize if I'm missing some kind of Horror Nights lore, but he had like a hoodie on, and his face was like all swirled. I don't know who he was supposed to be or if he was new, but I was cheering for Tooth like very aggressively, like one of my first times through there. And they were like standing in the middle at the end, like, excuse me, what about me? And like followed me like pretty far past the zone, like obviously where they're still allowed to roam, but like in front of like the restaurant there. And I was like, I'm sorry, you're amazing too. And they were like kind of gave a nod, like, thank you, kind of thing, which was fun. But I had some great interactions in there. It was it just didn't make the top 3, but it was really, really good.
Hoodie swirly eyeball person always was like, it, like they were obviously still in like the zone parameters, but they'd be popping up out of nowhere. I'm like, how'd you get over here?
They lingered.
They lingered, and they camouflaged well, because it looked like they were just wearing a hoodie.
Yep.
So until they turned around. Oh god, it was scary.
My top three are so hard. I've gone back and forth so many times about these. I think this just makes the most sense though. And this is based, I think all three of these zones are phenomenal and some of the best zones that Universal's ever done. My only thing is like, which ones did I really get like the best interactions with and things like that as far as like ranking these three. So my number three, and I had fantastic interactions in this, so it's nothing on the cast, it's just probably that I maybe wasn't in this zone as much, is Dark Zodiac. I loved this zone. My biggest issue was also the chainsaws. And it's a little different from Bella. I don't have a fear of chainsaws, but I don't like the sound and I definitely don't like the smell. It makes me feel ill. So I just am not, when there's one chainsaw, all right. But like there are so many chainsaws. I always actively tried to avoid the cast change for that one because they were just revving them up. So it was just not not my favorite thing. So honestly, a lot of times what I would do is I would walk up on the sidewalk and then go into the zone after the main chainsaws at the front would pass. So I loved a lot of the different characters in there. I love that they were like lit up so you could see which one they were instead of being like, oh, I don't know which one's supposed to be my zodiac. Who are you? Because they don't really talk. So it was really cool. There's a lot of use of stilts. Their outfits looked like really pretty, like their paint and stuff during the day as well. And I just had some great interactions. Like, of course, Pisces on the stage was amazing because I'm a Pisces. She was very fun to interact with. I loved the Gemini where their face was switching. Like I could never tell what the front was. Like that was really cool. Sagittarius was always very aggressive, and I told him he was my favorite on the last day, and he gave me a fist bump and just stuff like that. So it was just very fun. They always scared me through that zone. They always got in my face and had a good time, whether I was alone or with friends. I just always had great interactions in there. But yeah, so that was fun. I think honestly the chainsaws were the number one reason that they just didn't make it into the 2 spot for me. My number 2, and I did say I had trouble with all 3. I knew my number 1 for sure from the first night, but my number 2 was Jungle of Doom. And it was actually lower on my hype list because I wasn't sure what to expect, but I loved Jungle of Doom. And actually I interacted with the Oddfellow here. Adam usually calls him Young Fellow, which I think is fun because it's him as he's discovering his immortality powers in the Jungle of Doom. So I really liked interacting with him. He would go up and do his thing on the stage and then come down. I interacted with both casts for this a lot, and they both had their own fun personalities where they were obviously very similar because they're playing the same character, but they did it just a little bit differently, and it was so much fun talking to them. There was one of them that was like super aggressive and he was going after people, and I was like, how are you doing, Oddfellow? It's the last night. And he was like, I'm all right. He was like, these people think they can underestimate me, so I went after him. He was like going after like some kids that were like making like teenagers that were making fun of him or something, and he got him, and he was like, feels good, got those souls, gotta get them before the end of the night.
He's so valid for going after the annoying teenagers at Horror Nights. He needs to be there every year so he can be on like teenager patrol. No offense to the good teenagers that do go to Horror Nights, y'all are great, but
if you're listening to this, we're not talking about you.
No, because y'all are good people. But my God, we need Oddfellow.
We do.
We need Young Fellow. All the Oddfellows need to unite and like squat up and get their souls. Like, I swear.
Yep. And then directly after that, he went after a girl who was on her phone and was like, you need to be paying attention. We need to find the souls. It was just it was great. So that was really fun. But then also like, there's just some really good character interactions in there. I know there's a plant, on Twitter. She goes by Audrey3, and I loved her. She was really fun with the yellow eyeballs, bunch of eyeballs. And they looked gorgeous in the day also, by the way, all these characters. And then like the stilts people were very aggressive and fun. They jump down a lot and get right in your face. And then there was the bug with the cute little hands. It was good. And they had like some good trigger scares in there too. I loved Jungle of Doom. My only thing is I wish there was a sidewalk kind of area for there so that the people who are trying to really interact in the zone kind of had more space. I think that's a nice thing in Vamp and Dark Zodiac, where there's usually more space there, and they can, people who want to speed walk can go on the sidewalk, and people who want to kind of interact and mingle can go in the middle. But other than the location, like, that was just fantastic. I loved the bats and everything in the trees. And then, of course, my number one is Vamp 69. Vamp zones are always my favorite. I want them to do all of them. I want a 90s one. I want a futuristic one. I want like a 1920s one. I want every era of vampires they will give us.
A 90s one and a 20s one, or like a Y2K, like 2000s.
Oh, yeah.
Oh my God.
Vamp
and I hope
3000.
Vamp 3000, they could just play Jonas Brothers. They could somehow get the rights to Jonas Brothers.
Yes!
I've been to the year 3000. Not much has changed, but we live underwater. You know?
It's an underwater zone, actually. It's underwater vampires.
You're actually, instead of a new lagoon show, that's where the scare zone is. And you have to go, you have to be scuba certified. Like, it'll be a whole thing.
I already am. It's perfect.
You're scuba certified?
Yes.
Why?
I don't know. I used to work at this is Kelly Laurie here. I volunteered at the Clearwater Marine Aquarium for like 6 years as a volunteer diver.
Are you forklift certified?
No.
Damn.
No, I'm not.
You should be. I want to get forklift certified.
I'll think about it. If there was a scare zone that required it, I'd do it.
There was one in Shipyard 32.
See what happened to the last guy? That crate all over the place.
It's true.
You'd
all right,
be a
well,
better
I'll work
forklift
on
driver
it.
than that.
Yeah, I need Vamp 2K and Vamp Roaring 20s. But anyway, I want all the Vamp zones. I loved them. It was great. Great interactions. I talked about a couple of them in the beginning. When Bella was talking, I do wish there was a stage performance. I know that they had people run up on the stage. I did see that, but I really wanted like actual performances. I'm not sure. There must have been some kind of reason, like maybe they weren't able to get rights to certain songs that they wanted to use. I personally would have loved to see like Cat and the Gemstones and had like, Universal made up songs. Like, I think that would have been cool. I know it's a lot of effort, but I think something like that would have been awesome. So I was really hoping for a stage show there, especially after we got the stage put up. But, I have to assume that creative well, it's not creative department, but whoever does that kind of stuff for Horror Nights.
Entertainment.
Entertainment. Like, I have to assume they had some kind of reason. So I'll allow it. But in the future, I really loved, like, the stage was my favorite part of Vamp 85 because they really, like, they would do Thriller and they had, like, the ball drop and stuff like that. So something like that would have been nice, but I feel like there were so many good interactions, like, with the conga line and everything like that. And just the victims were great. The vampires were great. Everyone was great. So, I'll allow the lack of a big stage show, but I could have lived in this zone. It was so much fun. Honestly, I didn't spend as much time in there as I would have liked just because I only had a few nights that I could go to the event. I could pretty much only go on weekends, and I really wanted to make sure I was maximizing time in the houses and spending time with friends and things like that. So I didn't get enough time in any of the zones, but this one in particular, I wish that I could go back to.
What you're saying, Kelly, about this being one of the best years for zones for you, I completely agree. It's really, really hard for me to parse out, well, my number one. Kind of like y'all, I'm like, I know my number one. My number one's my number one. But honestly, they're all kind of tied in some way. And like the way I'm ranking them right now, it's like, what did I have the strongest memories in? What am I going to go back to? What interactions am I going to think about? Because it was such a strong year. And I've only been going since 2019. In 2019, I probably really did 3 out of 5 zones, maybe even 2 out of 5 zones. I don't have strong, besides Zombieland, just because we were in there for a while because we needed to, rest our feet. And it's like, oh, let's see some zombies jump out of porta potties. That's fun. So 2019, I really didn't get the full breadth of scare zones. 30 is because of COVID, but there's like one standout zone, and I really didn't like the other zones that year. And then last year had some of my some favorite zones and some that I don't remember what they were. This year, it's like they're all so strong. I really don't understand what people are talking about. We brought this up earlier. I don't know what they're talking about when they say that this is iffy mixed year for zones. Maybe if you've been doing it for 32, 33 years, but for me, who's only done 4 years, I'm like, these are all bangers. I love how the lore tied into the Oddfellow lore. His backstory was so present. These are all my favorite versions, like chapters of the Oddfellow lore. So I love that they got all this representation. I love the interactions. They are all scary, and they were all fun scary to me. And it's because of the memories they make. And this was such a strong year for zones. So when I say my number 5 is my number 5, my heart breaks because I think at any point in the year, one of these was my number 1 because it's so hard to parse these out. And I'm going to say my number 5, and I'm not going to believe myself because I'm like, are you sure about that? No, I'm not. But I'm going to say that my number 5 is Jungle of Doom Expedition Horror, which at the opening weekend, it was my number 1. It was my number 1 opening weekend. That's how good this year was. But I think it just came down to I didn't have all those interaction memories that y'all have in it. I think it was a fantastic zone. I did really enjoy walking through it and seeing all the creatures. The coin shaker scared the crap out of me. I love seeing other people get scared in the zone. It made me really happy. I did love going through the giant billows of fog. The secret is, folks, just keep on walking. That's how you make it. You just keep on walking. Don't stop. Oh, dear God, don't stop. I breathed in so much fog every time I came back home at 5 a.m. I felt like I was dying because that HHN fog just hits too good. No, this was such a good zone. It is a callback kind of to HHN 12, I want to say, back at Islands, which is a house nobody remembers. So in a way, it redeemed a really what's the word? Unremarkable house and made it into a wonderful zone and really fleshed out that small chapter of HHN lore to be pretty significant and an icon's backstory. Loved all the scare actors in there. Loved the little stage show. Loved how young fellow, as I call him, he kept on going around saying souls. I love the universal plane. Little Easter egg for those of you who watch old Universal movies like The Bride of Frankenstein and The Mummy and all of that. Loved it. I really, really did love it. It hurts to put it at 5, guys. It really does. No
5 guys.
My number 4 is Dr. Oddfellow's collection of horror, which I loved. I loved it. And I usually don't love these table of content zones. Like, I really didn't come to appreciate Horrors of Halloween last year until I saw the way that cast was interacting with each other and seeing all the different versions of the Pumpkin Lord when I spent like an hour in there with you, Bella, last year. That's really when I gained that appreciation for it.
I loved that one.
But with Collection of Horror, it felt essential. Like, I felt like if you didn't do Collection of Horror this year, you missed out on something huge. And it's because you had Oddfellow there doing like a pretty extensive monologue and he was captivating every time. Like, if I heard his groovy music going off, I'm like, I will be sat wherever I am. He was amazing. I said in the past that he was instantly as iconic as, no pun intended, as James Keaton is as Jack. He's been playing Jack for 20 plus years now. His portrayal is legendary. And these guys who are playing Oddfellow matched him immediately. And honestly, like, I'm like, does he surpass Jack? Does he surpass the Usher? Like, it's really, really tough. I mean, like, he makes the phrase, I'm sorry, one more time, I can't hear you, like, when you cheer. He made that sound cool. No one makes that sound cool, but Oddfellow did. Oddfellow did. True. His monologues were always great. I loved the all the different representations of all the different zones. And I think when they brought clowns in, because I don't think they had clowns opening weekend, but later they brought in clowns and it made the whole zone click. It was awesome. It was amazing. Yeah, I had to make sure when I took people that we sat in Collection of Horror for a little bit, because it was the thesis statement of the year, not just in like table of contents wise, but like that was HHN 32. It was amazing. I loved it. 3. Now we're getting into like the really core memories. Oh, sorry, I forgot about a core memory in Collection of Horror. So I didn't really interact with him too much. I mostly like observed from a distance, took video and all of that, and just enjoyed myself. But when I went with my friends Brooke and Jonathan, longtime listeners, Jonathan started the show with me. But I went with him and his wife Brooke for their first time, and he immediately went to Brooke, and they had a nice little interaction. It was fun, and he's just as captivating in a small conversation, an intimate setting, as he is on the screen, or not the screen, the stage, on the stage with the microphone. I love seeing how he interacted with kids. Like, he was so good with kids. And I know it's not a kid event, it's not a family event, but kids can come and enjoy horror, and they did, and he made them feel welcome. And I hear all the stories that people tell about what this zone meant to them, and I want to cry reading about that, just because of how great this icon was. So, my number 3, Vamp 69, Summer of Blood. What fun times. What fun times. You might even say that you've made me so very happy, this zone. You guys talked about how much fun it was, so I don't think I need to go any further into that, because everything you said is exactly right. Leo vibes and Holy Water Guy and all the dancers and whatever. Granny, they got Granny. Oh no. I always made a point. I remember I actually got the Last of Us Fedra cart just so I could exit into Vamp 69 and enjoy it, because it really wasn't on my path that night. Like, I gotta go into Vamp. And I remember my very last night, I went in for like 10 minutes for the final night. I said I wasn't going to, but a friend of mine wanted some pizza fries. Shout out Rebecca. She wanted some pizza fries, but she didn't have a ticket to the event, so I went and got her pizza fries, and that meant I had to go through Vamp because I went to Louis, and I almost cried walking through Vamp for the last time because of how core and how awesome that zone was, and how fun it was, and just how they were killing it. When I saw that they won Zone of the Year, I'm like, yeah, that makes sense. It could be my number 1. It's not my number 1, but it's tied with my number 1 and my number 5, my number 2, my number 4. They're all tied. It's too good. I have this shirt about how great the scare zones are. It was wonderful. Number 2 is Shipyard 32 Horrors Unhinged, which I understand all the complaints. I had the same complaints. It was lower on my list because of those complaints. It's cramped. You can't vibe in there. You really just got to get in and get out in 30 seconds or less, because it's crowded, it's small, and the ops don't let you stand unless you're on the sidewalk, and you know it's not too much to observe there, the way Graveyard was, for example, last year. But Kelly, you mentioned the interactions that you had, and I shared one of them. I remember going through, and you and we love Tooth Fairy, cheered on Tooth Fairy, and that's when she did her whole moment, like, where I hear someone cheering for me, where is it? And then Tooth Fairy saw us, we cheered her on again, and she did her little dance, and it was so wholesome. And then we went down, and you gave Patricia heart hands, and she gave you heart wings. Oh,
that was the nicest thing of my whole life. I didn't even talk about Patricia, and I love her.
Iconic. And then I love seeing, Nosferatu. I love seeing my Conjure the Dark demon boy. I loved Conjure the Dark, which was also in this area.
Is that who he was? I loved him too.
Yeah, the demon guy with the big horn.
He was fun.
Yeah, with the club. He's the one Bella was talking about that went swinging. Yeah, he was great. Chupacabras. They weren't out, but there was a box of Chupacabras. I loved Chupacabras last year. But I think the reason this zone is at my number 2, besides these wholesome interactions and these great memories, and the score was beautiful, by the way. Love the score going through there. Felt like nothing else in that event. But it reminded me how much I love these houses and these creatures that were represented in it. Like, in my all-time ranking of Halloween Horror Nights, Revenge of the Tooth Fairy went to its rightful place, higher in my top 10 because of this zone. And Patricia, she got a bigger highlight. She was in Eddie's Revenge, and here she is, becoming basically HHN 32's second icon because of how she was represented here. And I think that's really the coolest thing that could happen in a zone, besides your life changing. So second to your life change is it makes you love the event even more in retrospect. And also it was wholesome and it was beautiful. So that leaves number 1. I'm wearing the friendship bracelet for it. My little Capricorn friendship bracelet. I freaking love Dark Zodiac. Oh man, Is it my number one? I don't know. I have a special spot for Eddie's Revenge, but certainly in my top 3 of all time. I love Dark Zodiac. Not necessarily because of like the lore in it and anything. I think it's cool that we get to see the Zodiac dimension that Oddfellow was stuck in all of his for 15 years because Jack killed him, and so he's in the Zodiac dimension. You don't see that, but you get to see the Zodiac dimension. And the reason it's my number one is because it got scarier every time I went through it. And I'm partial to chainsaws. I love when the chainsaws are out and about. Sometimes they give trauma, but they're still very scary. They're never not scary. Because they're, very, very sudden and loud, but the scare actors in here were just on a whole nother scare level to the rest of the zones. And I love the other zones, as I've said. But Zodiac was like working overtime, and I'm like, how are you getting scarier? And I remember walking through it with another buddy of mine, and a Zodiac creature hissed at us. Like, I didn't know you hiss. It scared me. I had to UO fist bump. It was too good. I also, there's a great memory. So Brooke, as I mentioned, she's in a wheelchair, or she uses a wheelchair in the parks, especially with like a very physically intensive event like Halloween Horror Nights. And one of the Zodiac creatures, the one who always hung out by Pantages, came up to us and stole Brooke away. And it was the funniest thing. It was the greatest thing. Was it the ethical thing? I don't know, but it was fantastic. And I'll always remember that. I had my best memories and some of my best scares in Dark Zodiac. God, I love it. Yeah, this was my favorite year for zones by far. That I've done. But the scare actors were killing it. They really imbued so much personality, and some of them were faceless creatures, but you knew them, you recognized them. You're like, I don't know who is who. I don't know what to call you, Zodiac creatures, but I'm recognizing you, and you like the Buster Sword from Final Fantasy VII. You guys like the chainsaws, and you just like to be a little gremlin. And that's another thing too with Zodiac, is that it really used the stages and these like ways to direct your attention, like Scorpio Lady. Like, it was all like, it really used the different techniques I've seen them use the past 4 years and make it really gel really well, even though it wasn't super story intensive like Shipyard or Jungle of Doom. Really, the vibes were there, and it led right into Collection of Horror. And I think it was a really effective way by having like that guardian standing out front, the herald, and just nodding at you and bowing to you as like, yes, you're about to be terrified. And I said, yes, sir. And moved on. I loved it. Such a great year for zones. That's what I'm gonna miss most. It's these freaking zones.
The zones were so solid, and like, I know all of us, like, our rankings are all very different, but like all of us said how much we love the zones, how much fun we had in the zones. And like, I wish there was a way for it to be one big scare zone, and there's just people everywhere, because it is just like, I love scare zones. They're so fun. They're a great introduction into the event, because I mean, sometimes they can be really scary, but other times, like, they're just being so silly, and I love it. I always think it's a really good like appetizer into the houses. Little taste of terror. I don't know why I went Gordon Ramsay there.
Adam, correct me if I'm wrong, but Dark Zodiac was pretty low on your hype list.
I think so. I think it sounded the most generic. But I think there's two things that Horror Nights is always shocking me, and it's, number one, this house sounds generic, this zone sounds generic, and then they blow me away. And number two is never doubt the monsters. So there's that.
That part.
Yeah, Zodiac was really low, I believe. And look at it now. I've got the friendship bracelet. I've got Zodiac creature on my tee. Love them. I mean, I also have, Vamp and Nosferatu and Jungle Dude and Oddfellow, of course. So I got them all. But
I should have gotten that shirt. I love that shirt.
I know, me too.
So good.
I know, if I could get I might be up in Orlando for the garage sale. Maybe.
Bella, if you see an extra shirt,
I will.
I'll
if I'm up
my size.
If I'm in Orlando when the garage sale is happening, I think it's next weekend.
Yeah, because I won't be there. That's the one thing I would actually really want. Like, everything else I could do without. But
I also do I even want to deal with the garage sale?
I know, that's the thing.
That's scary. But you know what I do want to deal with? our house rankings. I want to hear what y'all think about this event.
Stay tuned this week for the continuation of our celebration of Halloween Horror Nights 32. This Wednesday, our house rankings and reviews, and on Friday, our general thoughts of the event and everything else that we did not yet talk about, as well as a special surprise at the beginning of Friday's episode, so stay tuned for that. It's going to be wonderful, but special thanks to our patrons over at patreon.com/themeparkworkshop. Special thank you to our $20 patron, Jen Harvey. So humbled by that. You're in the Amazing Adventures tier because you are amazing. Special thanks also to our other patrons who are just as wonderful: Landon Kanoki, Jonathan Edward, Jordan Buster, Greg Harvey, and Joshua Gonzalez. You can follow the show at Workshop TP on Twitter and at Theme Park Workshop on Instagram, TikTok, and Facebook. You can also follow us individually. You can follow me, Adam, at AdamJ_film on Twitter. You can follow Kelly on Twitter at Killer_Kells. And you can follow Bella at Bella Harvey with 2 Y's on Twitter. And you should follow her theme park photography Instagram account, which is at Flynn Rider's Nose. While you're at it, subscribe to the YouTube channel, comment below, subscribe to the podcast feeds, hit the pull down on Spotify, share the show with your friends, stay tuned, give us your rankings, all of those wonderful things, and we'll see you later this week. It's gonna be great. Spooky Friends!